And that brings us to the cherubim. A lot of church figures in early church history would try to apply, because we know that there's a hierarchy, right? Even Yeshua says that those that teach and practice the commandments will be called greatest in the kingdom, and those that teach to do away with even the least of them will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. So we know that there's a hierarchy even just in the resurrected mankind, but there appears to be, even like in text of Apocalypse of Abraham and Testament of Levi, that angels in the lower heavens are underneath the authority of angels in the higher heavens, whereas Yahweh Most High is highest in authority over all of them. But the early church figures seem to have a unanimous understanding of a hierarchy in the angels, with the seraphim being over the cherubim and the cherubim being over the other angels beneath them. But cherubim comes from cherub, which is Strong's 3742, a Hebrew word of uncertain derivation. When you go to look it up, you see a lot of that. And so they immediately start turning to other languages to try to see maybe a Semitic tie in the languages surrounding the Hebrews of what they used a similar word for. So in Hebrew, we do have karob, which does mean near, right? Like an angel of his presence and near his presence. In Assyrian, there's karabu, which means to bless or to be near. Another variation of that word also means great and mighty. Kirabu, it's a name of a winged bull, which I find interesting. And in Arabic, Carib is a ship of transport. And in the Chaldee, Carab means to plow, like a plower, i.e. maybe an ox. So it's interesting that we'll see some other descriptions that incorporate that concept of an ox or a bull.
Interesting.
But the first time we see them here in the modern American canon, would you read Genesis 3:24?
So he drove the man out, and at the east of the Garden of Eden, he stationed the cherubim and the flaming sword which turned every direction to guard the way to the tree of life.
Okay, so these cherubim were stationed at the entry of the Garden of Eden as private paradise security, right? Like bouncers to God's club, and Adam and Eve just got told to bounce, right? Kicked out of the Garden of Eden for the transgression. Apparently that sword will be removed when we are able to return back to the Garden of Eden, as Testament of Levi describes. So Yahweh is enthroned above the cherubim, and we see that in 1 Enoch 70, verse 9, 1 Samuel 4:4, 2 Samuel 6:2, 2 Kings 19:15. The prayer of Azariah, don't be alarmed, Azariah is just short for prayer of Azariah, which is one of the 14 books known as quote-unquote Apocrypha. It was in our original King James 1611 Bible, in Psalm 80, verse 1, 99, verse 1, and Isaiah 37:16. God is enthroned above cherubim, it says often.
Yeah. And this is what we see in Ezekiel as well.
It is, right?
Yeah.
So they're bodyguards.
Yeah.
And not only that, you read these.
2 Samuel 22:11, he rode on a cherubim and flew. He appeared on the wings of the wind. And then Psalm 18:10, it says, he rode upon a cherubim and flew, and he sped upon the wings of the wind.
Yes,
you know, these verses, they make so much more sense these days.
Because he's physically riding on them, right? Or
yeah, right.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Apparently, I mean, like, yeah, because like it described earlier in the one of the Dead Sea Scroll songs of the Sabbath, as well as what we're going to see in Ezekiel is, you know, it's as if he has a mobile throne, and this is not the Pope mobile, but it's like he has a mobile throne, and the base of that throne is like a firm material that's clear, and there's angels underneath it that carry it around. This could be where the ancient kings got this idea to have their servants literally carry the throne with the king on it, as they would carry him around.
Yeah, they would.
And it's kind of the same idea of the Levites with the poles taking the Ark of the Covenant, which was the throne of God, out onto the battlefield.
It's fun looking at all the different interpretations that the artists have when they're trying to illustrate these things. Like we've talked about in episode 26, how the Ark of the Covenant had the cherubim over it, and that is a copy of what's going on in heaven, because it's called a mercy seat, and it's a copy of where Yahweh sits in the heaven with the cherubim guarding his throne. And so if he rides on them, that does give this appearance of maybe something that can be rode, like a horse bull type shape. But yeah, we see in Ezekiel something a little bit different than what's pictured here. However, you made an interesting point in one of your presentations that said that in Revelation 6, the living creatures described being around that throne are a little different than what's being described in Ezekiel. There's separate beings that are for the mobile throne versus the permanent throne atop the seventh heaven.
Yeah, because it seems like those Revelation living creatures line up with the Apocalypse of Abraham.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, as opposed to the ones in Ezekiel and the mobile throne.
It's possible because the ones in Revelation 6 are just described as like individuals with separate faces, whereas the ones in Ezekiel are like one with 4 faces of each of these creatures. So, yeah, we'll talk
And they
more
have
about
different
that.
numbers of wings and everything. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll see that again. Remind us who Josephus was.
2nd century Pharisee,
Mhm.
a rabbi, scholar, historian, spoke Hebrew and Greek.
That's right. And he had a lot of commentary.
Yeah, he wrote a whole volumes of the history of his people, but there was a lot of his own thoughts inserted into those volumes.
Take it with a grain of salt for sure. This is from the Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 6. It says, upon this, its cover were 2 images, this being the Ark of the Covenant he's talking about, which the Hebrews called cherubims. They are flying creatures, but their form is not like to that of any of the creatures which men have seen. So he's speaking to the nature of what the cherubim look like, specifically the ones in Solomon's temple, right? Second temple period.
So Ezekiel 1:5-7, within it there were 4 figures, within it there were figures resembling 4 living beings. And this was their appearance. They had human form. Each of them had 4 faces and 4 wings. Their legs were straight, and their feet were like a calf's hoof, and they gleamed like burnished bronze.
Chapter 1, verse 8-9, under their wings, on their 4 sides, were human hands. So we spoke to the human forms that they had, even though they have calves' feet. And as for the faces and wings of the 4 of them, their wings touched one another. Their faces did not turn when they moved. Each went straight forward.
And as for the form of their faces, each had the face of a man. All 4 had the face of a lion on the right, and the face of a bull on the left, and all 4 had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces. Their wings were spread out above. Each had 2 touching another being, and 2 covering their bodies. This isn't in the text, just quick commentary for me. I just think it's interesting that these animals represented, right? You got the bull, right, which is one of the most powerful creatures of the land cattle. You got one of the most deadly predators amongst the felines, the lion. And then you got one of the most deadly aerial predators. And then you have man.
Yeah.
Just in case you ever wondered, the Father knows the deadly potential of man. It's the face of a man with all these other super predators. So he knows that we have a strong propensity to not behave well.
True.
That's personal commentary, but aside.
Ezekiel 10:21 in the New American Standard Bible says each one had 4 faces and each one 4 wings. However, same passage in the Septuagint says that each one had 8 wings. Then you go to the International Standard Version of Ezekiel 1:6, and it says, except that they each had 4 faces and 4 pairs of wings, which is 8, right? Mm-hmm. And then as we're talking about Revelation 4:8, that the living creatures there around the throne, they have 6 wings. So are these contradictions? Are these just textual variances? And I really liked, like I said, what you had to say, that there's different creatures being described.
Like I blabbered a whole bunch earlier about how awesome he is to create all these individual things with unique character traits and unique personalities and unique descriptions, So yeah, he's lots of different things being created to serve him.
Yeah, there's something interesting about, now you mentioned how the eagle is one of the greatest predators of the air birds, but check out what this clip has to say about that specific word translated as eagle.
Okay, cool.
Scattered throughout the Bible, there are clues that point to a famous but horrific messenger of God, a tetramorph, a combination of 4 creatures that make up the angel known as the cherub. The real message this angel carries has been lost through the centuries. It is a terrifying creature, not the pudgy, naked boy many artists have depicted. By examining its descriptions in detail, we can finally reveal the true meaning behind its design. The best man for the job is Ezekiel. He was the prophet who got the best look at the cherub. In a vision, Ezekiel saw a storm. A wind was coming from the north, a great cloud with flashing fire. Inside, there were figures resembling 4 living beings, and they traveled like bolts of lightning. The ancient text explains that inside the beings there was something that looked like burning coals of fire. Each creature had 4 wings and 4 faces, translated from the ancient Hebrew as lion, man, ox, and eagle. These were the cherubim. We're told that they carried the wheels to God's throne. And Ezekiel was taken on one wild ride. The cherub is one of the most holy yet most terrifying beasts in the Bible. It is ranked second in the Bible's top 10 of holy angels, and it flies through many of the Bible's books, chapters, and verses.
There are a number of other references to cherubs or cherubim in the Hebrew Bible besides in the book of Ezekiel. For example, in Psalm 18, God rides a cherub. In other Psalms, cherubim are surrounding the throne of God or supporting the throne of God. And of course, there are two cherubim on top of the Ark of the Covenant, acting almost as guardians of that ark. The most famous cherubim are probably the cherubim that God places at the entrance to the Garden of Eden in order to prevent Eve and Adam from returning after they have been exiled.
A guardian of arks and gates, was the cherub simply considered a brawny bouncer, keeping man from entering sacred places? For the ancients, it would have represented ultimate power.
The strongest animals that exist in the ancient Near Eastern repertoire are the lion and the bull. Both represent raw power at its ultimate. In addition to that, you also have the eagle, the most powerful of the birds that are in the sky. Needless to say, if you combine all three of them, the bull, the lion, and the eagle, you have the ultimate power. You have the strongest thing that you can imagine. In modern day terms, it's combining a nuclear submarine, an Abrams tank, and an F-16, all packed into one package.
So, the cherub is a complete power package, a combination of man and three animal kings. The lion is considered king of the beasts, its mane a royal crown. Weighing up to 500 pounds, these powerful cats are at the top of the food chain, and there have been many instances of man falling prey to this animal king. The ox is nothing less than the king of domestic beasts, the bearer of great burdens, giving itself willingly to sacrifice. And the eagle, well, the eagle in the cherub actually isn't an eagle. The original Hebrew points to a different bird. For centuries now, a mistranslation has plucked great symbolic power from the head of the cherub.
In the Bible, the king of birds is the Nesher. Nesher is usually translated as eagle, but if we look at the various descriptions of the Nesher given throughout Scripture, we see that it can't be the eagle. First of all, the Nesher is described as being bald. Now, eagles are not bald. Even the American bald eagle is not actually bald. It has white feathers on its head, and it was originally called the baldy-headed eagle. In Old English, baldy meant white, so it was the white-headed eagle. Eventually, that name, baldy-headed eagle, became shortened to bald eagle. But it's not bald. In addition, the Nesher is described in Scripture as feeding on carrion, and eagles usually take live prey. So which bird is bald and feeds on carrion? It's this bird behind me, the griffon vulture, largest and most magnificent bird of prey in the Middle East. This is the Nesher of Scripture. This is the bald bird that feeds on carrion. And those facts are actually connected. Being bald means that it can insert its head into the carcasses of the animals that it's eating without getting blood and guts caught up in the feathers of its head. It's also the lord of the air, the highest flying bird. In fact, the altitude record for a bird is held by a griffon vulture, one of which once collided with an airplane at an amazing 37,000 feet. They even have special lungs which enable them to breathe at that altitude. The question is, if the Nesher is actually the griffon vulture, why does everybody think it's the eagle? The answer is that these translations took place in Europe. In Europe, there aren't so many griffon vultures, but there are a lot of very large and prominent eagles. That's the bird that Rome portrayed on its banners. However, in the land of the Bible, it's not the eagle which is the king of birds, it's the griffon vulture.
The correct translation for Nesher puts powerful meaning lost for centuries back into the cherub. The griffon vulture is the highest flying bird bird in the world, which fits well with the cherub's soaring and divine purpose. But a vulture signifies death. In the earthly realm, the natural world, it feeds on the dead. We can say that these two extreme natures of the Nesher mirror man's potential for virtue or for sin. The two extreme natures of the vulture also fit perfectly inside the cherub's divine double function.
Cherubim always function as a kind of in-between figure. They are mediators between the divine and the human, between these two realms. One of the roots of the word Cherubim in Hebrew goes back to an Akkadian meaning of gatekeeper. You think about what a gatekeeper does. A gatekeeper prevents access through a gate, but a gatekeeper also provides access through a gate. And I think that cherubim serve in this same double way. On the one hand, they may serve as guardians to prevent entrance. On the other hand, they may serve as access points, as entry points.
In Ezekiel's vision, the cherubim do open the gates to the divine and carry Ezekiel through the night skies to God. And later references to this angel suggest that in the end of days, the cherubim will once again open the gates to paradise and let humankind back into the garden. And so, we are back where we started, in the Garden of Eden.
Back where we started, to the Garden of Eden. That was some thought-provoking commentary and amazing visuals. Many of you might recognize that from a clip that we had in the Leviathan and Behemoth episode. It's from a show called Beasts of the Bible. And that was fun. I love the visuals. I wish we had that animator, right?
That's thought-provoking, that mistranslation of the eagle. It's actually a griffin bird. I didn't realize that they had those types of attributes, being able to fly that like that, and special bodies and lungs to be able to do that. It makes a lot of sense if they would need them. So that's really cool, man. Yeah.
Learn something new all the time. Man,
Yeah.
Scriptures are just inexhaustible. Every time you go through them and study specific aspects and break down certain words, you get to learn something new about it. And that's what I love about it.
Yeah, that's funny. It's because my last name is Griffin, so I always thought Griffin was just like a gross name growing up. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, what's the? Then I learned that it was, this protector bird was the idea of it, and I thought, oh, okay, I can roll with that. That's okay.
There you go. Yeah, and the griffin vulture is the highest flying of all the birds. What do you say that It's been on record that one hit a plane at 37,000 feet?
I don't know. I think you said that. Yeah.